It's been so great hearing about your journey and so fascinating. And I was wondering if you could maybe hone in specifically as Calypsus Brass, we are obviously very interested in one thing, brass music. So can you tell us a little bit about at what point did you begin writing for brass? How did you develop your compositional voice for brass? Just talking about that journey a little bit. I feel like we've kind of just made you join our world, whether you want to or not. We love your writing for brass and you're kind of stuck with us now. So can you talk a little about how that happened?
Yeah, oh, my pleasure. I do love brass instruments, and it's kind of a funny thing that I am probably more known in the world of brass players than the world of professional string players. Actually, take out the probably, I'm definitely more known among brass players. Well, it all started my 5th year at Hart. I did a double degree, double major, so it took 5 years. And it was my last year, and I had to come up with, okay, what's the next piece I'm going to write for my composition lessons? And I was studying with Steve Gritch, who happened to be a trombonist. I mean, he's a composer, but his instrument had been trombone. And I thought, well, gosh, I have never written anything for brass whatsoever. So this would be the time to do that. You know, I'm just finishing my undergrad and make sure I've written for every major group of instruments. And I happen to be studying with someone who is a brass player. So that's the time to do that. So I wrote Passacaglia. I did some listening. I spent, instead of, it was my first week of studying with Rich. I went to the first lesson and he said, okay, so, you know, what have you written? And I said, actually, nothing. I have spent the week listening to brass quintet music because I'm going to write a brass quintet, but I've not written for brass. So that's how I spent this week. And he said, okay, well, make sure you have something for next week. So the next week I brought in sketches for the beginning of Passacaglia, and that went fine. That's probably my most played piece. I mean, I wrote that in 1990, and I've written a number of pieces in between, but I think the Passacaglia might be my most played work. And I attribute that to the fact that it's pleasant enough sounding, yes, but it's also fairly reasonable to put together. You don't need a million rehearsals like my brass trio, which is pretty intricate. You know, that's a whole different story for rehearsal time. So yeah, I mean, I really didn't much know what I was doing. I won't say exactly that I started from scratch though, because I had had close friends who were brass players up through high school, you know, and during my undergrad. So I heard them playing and practicing and talking about challenges that they were working on, you know, in whatever piece. And I think that was a great sort of, it set the foundation. It was a good foundation for me in background on how to write for brass. So I was, you know, I wouldn't make a mistake like come out of the blue with just a super high note. You know, I wouldn't do that to someone because I know better than that just from talking to brass players, that that's something you don't particularly enjoy, as I've come to understand. So yeah, that Passacaglia was then premiered at New England Conservatory because I finished writing it in the spring semester, and then I went right from Hart to NEC, and there was a competition there to for a piece for brass quintet, because there was an honors brass quintet there, and they were going to choose one student work to perform, and it got chosen for that, and that's how it got premiered. And yeah, the Passacaglia is probably the piece that I sort of started to make my name. Well, I guess it definitely is because that was the first thing I ever wrote. And then some other people heard it, some brass players, and said, oh, do you write me a piece? And I guess the rest is history.